Okay, hi everybody, it's me, Nina. I just wanted to go to part 2 of my husband's liver transplant, and I'm taping this in the basement so it'd be quieter, so ignore the background. Sorry about that. Okay, at the end of part 1, I believe I left off where we had found out that it was cirrhosis of the liver, and that his father and his grandfather had both passed away from the same disease. Well, my husband was not a drinker. He had when he was young, and he never took very many pills ever. Even if he had a bad headache, he wouldn't hardly take even a Tylenol. And he was not obese. So those are some of the factors that can make you have cirrhosis. So we knew that that was not probably the cause for his. There had to be something different. So we went up to a large hospital in our state that is well known for transplants of all kinds. And we got up there, got introduced to a very nice doctor, and he was able to do more tests, and he found I'm not exactly sure the title of this gentleman, but he found him in Africa. He works all over the world, and he does, all he does is genetic testing of all different types. So they contacted this doctor, and he came to Ohio specifically to meet my husband. So he done his test, and then he called us back later, and we went back in, and he spent like 3 hours with us. I took in one of those little tape recorders, digital tape recorder things, and he said that was fine, because I knew that I was so worried and so overwhelmed already that I wouldn't remember half of what he had said. So I'm so thankful that I did that. A friend told me to do that, and thank goodness, thank you, Paula, for helping with that. So found out that his was genetic, and his genetic disease was called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, well known as alpha-1, and it can affect your lungs, your liver, or both. Well, so they assumed, because we have no real way of testing now, that my husband's grandfather and his dad both passed away of cirrhosis because of the exact same disease, genetic disease. So that kind of burdened our family, because now they had to go, most of them wanted to go, and some of them refused to go get tested. They didn't want to know. And, you know, I always thought, well, if they would find out, then maybe they wouldn't have to wait as long to get put on a transplant list, because that's what they ended up doing with my husband. They put him on the transplant list. He went through 4 days of intense testing. And I wrote a book, like in a diary form, and had it made okay, let me rephrase that. I cannot think of the site that I was on, but at the time I left almost daily, like little vlogs, or, you know, diaries that I would type out and save. And when I got up to the point where he had his transplant, I made that into a book. And I had 2 of them made, one for my son, one for my husband. I tried to find it for you guys today, just so I could kind of just give you a little look at it. I thought about someday maybe even having them published. I'm not sure if I'll do that or not, because it is very detailed. And it would probably be very, very helpful to people that are going through it, or family members, but probably not so much. It wouldn't be interesting probably for people that have not had anyone that had to have a transplant of any sort. It takes a lot out of you, mentally and physically, and just everything. So he passed all the 4 days of testing. He was approved to be put onto the transplant list, and he was sent home to wait. Well, we waited. It was just about a year, and in that year's time, he went really, really quick downhill. He not only was hallucinating still, and the ammonia was still going to his brain, causing all kinds of issues, but he started filling up with fluids, and he had at one time like 7 liters taken out, 8 liters a few days later. It just, once it started, it became constant, and more and more and more liquids were taken out of his abdomen area. And that was not painful to him at all. And I actually have a couple pictures that I went in and I took of him having that done. And I will try my best to post those on the last one of these. I'll see what I can do. I'm just new at all this stuff, so please have patience with me. Okay, so he waits for the year, and he's in the hospital a couple times because his kidneys were failing. And matter of fact, in April, this is by now, it is April, beginning of April, 2013. So 2 years had passed since his very first diagnosis. So he's in the hospital because he's filling up really, really often with the fluid and ascites. I think it was called, or ascites. And they was taking, like I said, 7, 8, as much as they could try to get out and still keep him healthy, because they were afraid of infection because of the needle poke. And it was a huge needle that would go into his abdomen, and it would just fill up in bottles, bottle after bottle of, they had 1 liter size bottles, and he would fill up. It was just horrible. So then that also was causing his kidneys to fail. Well, he was in the hospital, like I said, and was near death. His urine was just tiny bits for a day, and it was dark brown. So, you know, I knew, I'm not a professional, I'm not a nurse even, I'm not anything in the medical field, but I knew by the way he looked and the way he acted and by his output that time was short. And they told me, they came in and they did test after test constantly, and they told me that they would probably have to put him on dialysis. Well, then they would come back later that night and say, we're not sure about dialysis, because everything was shutting down so quickly that they were afraid if he, and I never did find out the reason why. If you guys know why, let me know. They never did put him on dialysis because they said they were afraid that they would get a call for a liver, and if he had just received dialysis, he would not be able to take that liver. Maybe because, I assumed it was because his levels would go back up to being above dire, is what I assume. So he never did get that, and they came up to me and told me, at this time, I had been staying up in a place called the Guest House. It's no longer there. And I had been staying there, and I could walk from that building over to the hospital, and I was afraid to leave him at all. So I stayed most of the time right beside him. And they came in, and they had told me that they were going to release him because there was nothing else they could do. And I remember thinking, my husband's laying there, and he's lost weight, except for his stomach was humongous. And he's dying. And what am I supposed to do? You know? And I questioned, I'm like, you know, why? Why can't he just stay here, you know? And truth be told, I was terrified. I didn't want him dying in my arms. I wanted someone to be there with me to help, you know? So they did. They said, go ahead and get your car and bring it over from the guest house. You take him and go back to the guest house. And if something comes up, we'll give you a call after a couple days. Just stay around a few days. Don't go back home until we've given you a call, either way. And I said, okay. So I ran to the guest house and got my car, and I prayed. I was like, God, when I came here to the guest house, I had prayed for you to please let him go home only if he's had a transplant. My phone's about ready to go off again, so it's going to have to be part 3. Please stick around.